You know that feeling when you've been preparing for something for like months?
Oh,
You've done all the reading, you've memorized the grammar rules, your flashcards are perfectly neatly color-coded and just stacked on your desk.
right. You feel completely ready.
Exactly, you feel ready. And then the actual moment of truth arrives. You're at a coffee shop or maybe you're traveling and someone just walks up to you, smiles, and says something incredibly basic in that new language you're trying to learn.
Just a standard greeting.
Yeah, just a simple, hey, how are you? And your brain just completely flatlines. You freeze.
Totally.
It's like a literal blue screen of death right behind your eyes, and all you can do is stand there, mouth half open, just blinking at them.
It is such a universal and honestly deeply humbling experience.
It really is.
And the worst part is the intense frustration that immediately follows, right? Because you know for an absolute fact that the vocabulary is sitting right there in your head.
Yes, you just studied it on Tuesday.
Exactly. But in that live, unstructured moment of human interaction, the connection is just severed. You're completely paralyzed.
Well, that exact moment of panic is exactly what we're dismantling today. Welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're pulling our insights from a really fascinating transcript by a creator named Honey. This is from her English podcast channel. The specific source we're looking at is titled The Path to English Fluency, Consistency Over Perfection. And our mission for you today is to totally deconstruct this highly intimidating, frankly exhausting idea of perfect English.
It's so exhausting.
It is. So we want to extract Honey's practical, totally stress-free roadmap for actually becoming a confident speaker. Okay, let's unpack this, because if you're listening to this and nodding along because you've spent hundreds of hours studying but still start sweating when someone asks for directions,
Right?
we really need to look at what Honey says about our definitions of fluency.
Yeah. To do that, the fundamental shift we need to make right from the start is moving completely away from the paradigm of flawless grammar. We really have to move the goalposts.
Okay, so redefine the goal.
Exactly. The objective of learning a language isn't to become a walking, talking dictionary. The objective is effective human connection.
Human connection.
Right. Before we can even build fluency, we have to unlearn this massive, wildly inflated idea of what a fluent speaker actually looks like.
Because I think people tend to equate fluency with speed and complexity, right?
Oh, absolutely. You picture a Hollywood movie star or like a debate champion delivering rapid-fire dialogue with massive multi-syllable vocabulary and absolutely bulletproof grammar.
Right, like an Aaron Sorkin script or something.
Exactly. But the source material makes a really crucial distinction here. Real fluency is significantly simpler. Fluency just means you can express your ideas and keep a conversation flowing naturally without, stopping every 5 seconds to search your mental archives.
And the most refreshing point from the source, and I love this, is that native speakers mess up constantly.
Oh, all the time.
We forget words, we stumble, we leave sentences totally unfinished. We literally stop and say, oh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Right. It happens all day long.
But because language learners hold themselves to this impossible robotic standard of perfection, they fall into this trap. They'll watch 3 hours of grammar videos, buy the heavy textbooks, memorize giant lists of verbs, but they never actually speak.
Yeah.
And then when that casual "how are you" comes along, the brain just yells, "system error."
What's fascinating here is that system error is such an accurate way to describe the cognitive bottleneck. Language is fundamentally a tool for communication, not a subject for passive data storage.
Right.
We treat it like we're studying for a history exam when we should be treating it like learning to play an instrument.
It's like trying to learn how to play a screaming electric guitar solo by only reading sheet music for a year.
That's a perfect analogy.
You can memorize all the notes, you can understand the time signatures, but you haven't built the calluses on your fingers. The second someone hands you the actual physical guitar on a stage, that sheet music isn't going to help your hands move.
Exactly.
But realistically, I mean, I get the theory, but don't I need a massive vocabulary first? If I don't stockpile all those individual words, how do I even have the raw materials to start communicating?
Well, that's the core cognitive disconnect we suffer from. We treat language like a math equation to be solved rather than a physical skill to be practiced.
Okay, a physical skill.
Yeah. If your practice is entirely theoretical, like only reading and listening, your brain never builds the neural pathways required for real-time output.
Right. The real-time part is what gets you.
You're essentially filling a massive warehouse with boxes, but you haven't built any roads for the delivery trucks to actually transport the boxes out of the warehouse.
Wow, okay, so the knowledge is trapped.
Exactly. When the practical pressure of a real conversation hits, your brain crashes because it's trying to process syntax, grammar rules, and vocabulary all at the exact same millisecond, totally from scratch.
So this data storage method, just hoarding individual words, is actually the root cause of the system error,
It is.
which means we have to completely overhaul how we process language internally. Honey suggests we need to stop learning single words entirely and start learning phrases or chunks of language.
Chunks, right.
So instead of just drilling the word hungry into your brain with a flashcard, you learn the phrase, I'm starving, or I could eat a horse, or let's grab something to eat.
Yeah.
Instead of just the word tired, you learn, I'm exhausted, or I'm really worn out. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Why does that actually fix the crash?
The underlying mechanism here is all about reducing your cognitive load.
Oh.
Think about what actually happens in your brain when you try to speak using single memorized words. First, you have a thought in your native language. Then, you search your mental dictionary for the foreign equivalent of word number 1.
Right.
Then word number 2. Then, you try to remember the grammar rule that connects those specific words. Then you worry about your pronunciation.
It's exhausting just hearing you list it all out.
Exactly. By the time you finally open your mouth to speak, the conversation has moved on, or you end up sounding incredibly rigid and robotic.
It's like opening a flat pack box from IKEA in the middle of a cocktail party
Oh, that's good.
and trying to assemble a chair from scratch before you can sit down.
Yes.
It's stressful, and people are just staring at you while you look for the little wrench.
The little Allen key.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Learning chunks of words is like buying pre-assembled furniture. You just pull the whole chair out of the box and place it in the room. You just drop the whole phrase into the conversation. It's infinitely faster.
That's a great way to visualize it. You're entirely bypassing the translation phase. When native speakers talk, they aren't assembling sentences word by word like individual Lego bricks.
Right, they don't have to think about it.
Exactly. They're pulling entire pre-assembled phrases from their memory bank. By learning chunks, you're mimicking the way a native brain actually stores language. This makes your speech sound much smoother, and it takes the pressure off your internal processor.
Honey gives a fantastic example of a highly useful phrase to just keep in your back pocket. The phrase is just, take your time.
Oh, that's a great one.
It's so good. It just means, relax. There's no need to hurry. It's such a warm, natural thing to say to someone. And the beauty is, you don't need to understand the underlying grammar of the imperative mood to use it.
Right, you don't need to analyze it.
You just use it.
Yeah.
And this ties into another massive internal shift Honey talks about. You have to start thinking in English. You have to kill that translation lag before it even starts.
Which honestly can sound incredibly daunting to a beginner. But the source emphasizes starting incredibly small. You don't need to narrate a complex philosophical debate in your head.
Right. Keep it simple.
You just start looking at the world around you as you go about your day and having basic internal monologues like, I'm hungry, that dog is cute, I need water.
You're just laying down those delivery roads we talked about earlier.
Precisely.
So if learning chunks and thinking in basic sentences is how we're supposed to process language internally, we have to look at how we're getting that language into our heads in the first place.
The inputs.
The inputs, yeah. Honey describes listening as food for your brain. It's how you naturally pick up the rhythm, the pronunciation, and those sentence patterns we just talked about.
Yeah, she mentions listening to podcasts while doing chores, even if, as she jokes, washing dishes is still washing dishes.
Right, it doesn't make the dishes any cleaner.
Unfortunately not. But it's about ambient immersion. However, the source material makes a very sharp, important distinction between passive listening and active consumption, especially when it comes to visual media like movies or YouTube.
Okay, passive versus active.
Yeah. Passive listening is totally fine for getting a feel for the rhythm and melody of the language while you're washing those dishes. But if you want to use media to actually improve your physical speaking ability, you have to watch actively.
Meaning you literally pause the video,
Mm-hmm.
you repeat the sentences out loud, you actively try to copy the actor's exact pronunciation. Honey even talks about practicing emotions and reactions out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Things like, oh, really? No way, that's awesome. You're kidding.
Which is so important.
She admits to fully acting out movie lines dramatically in her house when nobody's around, just becoming a full soap opera actor for 5 minutes.
I love that.
But I'll be honest, the active watching part sounds like a ton of work. If listening is just brain food, can't I just throw a movie on in the background while I scroll on my phone and let my brain soak it up through osmosis?
It's tempting for sure. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of how human communication actually works, we see why passive osmosis falls short for speaking.
Okay, why is that?
Well, passive listening helps with passive understanding. You will absolutely get better at hearing and comprehending the language. But speaking is a physical, muscular act.
Muscular.
Yes, it requires deep muscle memory. Your tongue, your lips, your vocal cords all need to learn how to move in entirely new ways to produce sounds that don't exist in your native language.
So when you're sitting on your couch just passively listening, your brain is working, but your facial muscles are doing absolutely nothing.
Exactly. You have to physically train your mouth. And beyond just the physical pronunciation, you're training the emotional delivery.
The emotional delivery.
Right. When you pause a movie and mimic the actor saying "no way" with genuine exaggerated surprise, you're hardwiring that vocabulary to an actual human emotion.
Ah, I see.
If you skip this active practice, you risk having an impressive vocabulary but sounding like an AI voice assistant when you try to use it. You haven't practiced the musicality, the pacing, and the emotional resonance of the language.
Oh, wow. So acting it out dramatically in your living room isn't just a silly exercise. It's literally programming the emotional context into your brain so it's there when you need it in real life.
That's exactly it.
All right, so we've got the internal tools thinking in chunks, and we've got the external inputs active mimicking. But none of this matters, absolutely zero, if fear stops you from actually opening your mouth when you're face-to-face with another human being.
Right, the execution phase.
Yeah, which brings us to the execution. Honey's core philosophy here is that consistency is vastly more important than intensity.
This is the exact hurdle where so many enthusiastic learners burn out.
Oh, yeah.
They think they need to block out a grueling 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon to cram grammar. But the source is unequivocal. 10 minutes a day is infinitely better than 10 hours once a month.
10 minutes. That's incredibly manageable. She outlines this super simple low-stakes routine. Morning, 10 minutes of listening. Afternoon, learn 5 useful phrases, not single words, but phrases. Evening, speak or write for 10 minutes. That's the whole routine.
It's the ultimate anti-burnout strategy. Neurologically, frequent, short bursts of activation build much stronger pathways than massive, exhausting cram sessions.
Little and often.
Exactly. Fluency doesn't happen overnight. It grows incrementally. But to even maintain that 10-minute routine, you have to conquer the fear of making mistakes.
The fear of judgment is huge. Honey uses a great analogy here. She says you wouldn't expect someone to execute a flawless ride on day 1 of learning to ride a bicycle.
Of course not.
You expect them to wobble. You expect them to scrape their knee. Language is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Mistakes aren't failures. They're literal proof that you're taking action.
Yeah.
But she notes that social media makes this psychological barrier so much harder to overcome.
Oh, the social media trap is profound and really damaging to learners.
Totally.
You log online and see a beautifully edited, color-graded video of an influencer speaking flawlessly, and it's so easy to feel entirely crushed. You think, I'll never sound like that, so why bother?
Right. It's so discouraging.
But as the source reminds us, you're only seeing their polished, final result. You aren't seeing their struggle. Every single fluent speaker you admire was once a beginner who couldn't string 2 basic words together.
You're comparing your messy chapter 1 to their edited chapter 20.
Precisely.
And that leads to this idea that fluency, at its core, is just about confidence. At first, your voice is going to shake, your brain is going to freeze, your sentences will feel agonizingly slow. And Honey emphasizes that this is completely 100% normal.
It really is.
She even gives some great survival phrases for this exact stage of the journey. I'm working on it little by little, and don't give up.
I love those.
But so what does this all mean? I want to push back on this routine for a second.
Okay, sure.
Honey herself jokes that a 5-year-old wouldn't say, "Today I would like to discuss economic globalization."
Right.
They use incredibly simple sentences. But as adults, let's be real, don't we feel embarrassed sounding like a 5-year-old? Imagine you run a business, you have a master's degree, and suddenly you're reduced to pointing at a window and saying, "The weather is hot today." It feels humiliating.
This raises an important question, and you've hit on what is arguably the biggest unseen barrier in language learning, the adult ego.
The ego, yeah.
As adults, our entire identity is built around being competent. We're used to being articulate, handling complex problems, and expressing nuance.
We want to sound smart.
Exactly. So when we're suddenly stripped of all that vocabulary and reduced to a beginner level in a new language, it feels like a profound loss of identity. It feels embarrassing.
Yeah.
Our ego screams at us to stay quiet and wait until we can say economic globalization perfectly before we dare open our mouths in public.
Because we don't want to look foolish. We'd rather be silent and seem mysterious than speak up and sound like a toddler.
Precisely. We let our own pride and the fear of judgment halt our progress entirely. We retreat back to the flashcards where it's safe.
Safety in the flashcard.
Right. But the harsh reality is accepting those basic small steps, fully embracing the little by little, is the only actual path to complex fluency. A child doesn't feel embarrassed saying basic sentences. They just use the clumsy tools they have to get what they want.
They just want the juice box.
Exactly. They don't care how they asked for it. Adults have to actively unlearn their own pride. Basic English builds the foundation for strong, complex fluency. If you refuse to sound like a beginner, you guarantee that you'll never become an expert.
You have to be willing to be bad at something to get good at it. You have to endure the wobble.
Endure the wobble, exactly.
That's a massive takeaway. Okay, as we bring all of this together, let's summarize the roadmap we've extracted from Honey's transcript today. First, we completely redefine what fluency actually is. It's not about perfect grammar or Hollywood speed. It's simply about human connection and expressing ideas naturally, even if you stumble.
Second, we identified the critical need to stop treating language like a database. We bypass that cognitive system error by learning pre-assembled phrases or chunks instead of isolated words.
Right.
And we fuel that internal processor by actively mimicking media, physically training our facial muscles and emotions, not just letting the audio wash over us passively while we scroll our phones.
And finally, we looked at the execution.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes down to a simple, consistent daily routine. Just 10 minutes of speaking or listening and letting go of the heavy adult ego that demands perfection before practice. So for you listening, the next time you try to speak a new language and you feel your palms sweat, your voice starts to shake, or you can only manage a sentence that a 5-year-old would use, don't panic.
Don't panic.
It isn't a system error. It's not a failure. It's just proof that you're taking action, you're building the physical muscle memory, and you're growing.
It's a profound shift in perspective that takes a lot of the pressure off. And it leaves us with something to really reflect on. If acquiring a language is ultimately about letting go of perfectionism, embracing those clumsy daily mistakes, and prioritizing consistency over intensity, how might adopting this exact consistency over perfection mindset transform the way you approach other intimidating challenges in your life?
Oh, that's a great point.
Whether it's learning an instrument, taking up a new sport, or even doing public speaking in your native language, what could you actually achieve if you simply allowed yourself to wobble on the bicycle in front of other people?
Wow. Because at the end of the day, when someone walks up to you at that coffee shop and says, hey, how are you? The goal isn't to deliver a perfectly coded, grammatically flawless response.
Not at all.
The goal is just to not freeze up, to smile back, and to keep the conversation going, little by little.